I remember having an odd and unnerving experience with Courage the Cowardly Dog when I was little. You see, Courage the Cowardly Dog is my favorite Cartoon Network show of all time, and ever since I was a child, I watched it constantly. Oddly enough, the show never really scared me, and the infamous King Ramses and You're Not Perfect fetus didn't traumatize my childhood like they did with many others. However, this episode that I did saw scared me a bit. It could just be a fake childhood memory or a dream that seemed a bit too real, but I still wanted to share my experiences in case anybody else saw this episode. The episode's title was Courage's Replacement, and judging by the title and overall synopsis of the episode, it seemed to either be an alternate version of Courage vs. Mecha Courage or of the original version. The TV info on this episode said, Courage must protect Muriel when a shady dog tries to replace him. This wasn't really out of the ordinary. In fact, it was a pretty normal synopsis. The episode began normally like all other episodes. The quality was perfect, the intro was normal, there was no static or absence of characters, none of that. It was just a normal intro. The title card came up and it read, Courage's Replacement, over a picture of what seemed to be some sort of pit bull grinning menacingly. The episode began like usual. Muriel was sitting on a rocking chair knitting. Courage was happily laying on her lap when Eustace was reading the newspaper and grumbling. Suddenly, there was a knock at the front door, and Courage jumped up and screamed in his comedic fashion, due to him being easily scared. Muriel walked over to the door and opened it as Eustace said, like usual, We don't want nothin'. Get out! As if he kept his eyes on the paper, in front of the door stood a small and sad-looking pit bull, wearing nothing but a small fedora and carrying a small bag with clothes and a briefcase. I managed to recognize the pit bull from the title card. He looked much more innocent here than he did in the, title card. Anyway, Muriel gasped as Courage carefully and shakily walked over to her, hiding behind her leg. The pit bull then pulled out a small folded piece of paper from his bag, which read, I'm a poor homeless dog. I have nowhere to go and I lack food, water, and shelter. If I could stay here for a while, I would greatly appreciate it. Courage squinted his eyes at this, obviously not trusting in the fellow canine. Why, of course you can stay here. We wouldn't mind. Plus, you have someone to play with and talk with here, Muriel cheerfully said as she led the pit bull in and pointed at Courage. Curiously, the pit bull was the same size and shape as Courage. He stared at Courage for a moment, and you could see a slight malicious smirk forming in his face as Courage's ears went down and he gulped. Muriel asked Courage to show the new house guest around, and then seemed to reluctantly agree, obviously scared. Everything was normal as Courage led the pit bull upstairs until they got to the bathroom. A massive sharp tooth and malicious grin formed in the pit bull's face as he pulled out a huge pipe from his briefcase. The pipe was way too big to fit in there, but it wasn't out of the ordinary since it was obviously for comedic purposes. Courage screamed and he tried running away, but the pit bull grabbed him by the neck, and he started brutally beating Courage with the pipe as he laughed. Of course, it was all in a cartoony fashion. There was no blood or gore or any of that shit. However, the beating was extremely brutal and long. It was similar to the Mask episode, where the cat brutally beat Courage up a lot, except this was longer and more violent. Eventually, Courage was bruised and beaten a mess as the pit bull's innocent facade came back, and he walked out of the bathroom, leaving poor Courage lying on the floor in pain. I expected the Courage to either laugh like he sometimes does after being hurt, or something funny to happen, but Courage just sobbed and whimpered in pain for quite some time. It was genuinely heartbreaking. The scene then faded into what seemed to be the next morning. Courage was still bruised as he walked into the kitchen, looking down. He heard both Eustace and Muriel gasping and wooing in surprise and joy. When he looked up, the pit bull was cooking an extremely fancy and delicious-looking breakfast for Muriel and Courage. Courage tried getting Muriel's attention to tell her about what had happened the previous night, but she was too mesmerized with the pit bull's cooking to pay attention to him. The episode changed into what seemed to be a compilation of the pit bull doing several tasks in exaggeratedly perfect ways. Each task he did made Muriel and Eustace focus all their attention on him, ignoring Courage. Of course, it didn't seem to be with any malice, but poor Courage was clearly hurt and saddened by the lack of attention towards him. The compilation finally ended, and it cut to the living room where Muriel was sitting on a rocking chair and Eustace was watching TV. However, The odd part was that Muriel had the pit bull in her lap instead of Courage, and Courage was on the floor, looking up at her with an extremely sad and heartbreaking look. Muriel didn't seem to notice, and she was petting the pit bull a lot, and rocking him in her lap back and forth. She occasionally did pet Courage, but it wasn't much, and he was still saddened. Courage suddenly got very angry, and then glared at the pit bull as he smirked at him. This was the last straw, and Courage went upstairs, sneaking into the room where the pit bull was sleeping in, and silently grabbing the suitcase. He ran up to the attic where his computer was, and he sat in front of it as he opened up the suitcase. Inside the suitcase were multiple newspaper cuts and printed internet articles about one certain pit bull. Courage got a curious look, and when he began reading one of them, his eyes widened as he let out a scream. I didn't understand why, until I managed to see what the newspaper said myself. Deranged pit bull escapes from prison, highly dangerous, accompanied with the mugshot of the same pit bull that was currently residing in Courage's home. He immediately ran downstairs to check on Eustace and Muriel in this living room, but they were nowhere to be seen, and so was the pit bull. A very ominous and suspenseful music played as Courage examined the kitchen for everything, looking for his owners as he panicked. Younger me was scared at this point, due to the music and the suspense, fearing the worst for Muriel and Eustace. Suddenly, Muriel's scream was heard coming from the basement, and Courage immediately rushed there to save his beloved owner. Eustace and Muriel were tied to the wall as two large buzzsaws attached to the strange contraption slowly moved towards them. Courage tried running towards them, but for some odd reason, he was stuck. Courage looked down to see some sort of sticky substance on the floor, attached to his legs and keeping him in place. He screamed and tried to get out of them as the buzzsaws got closer and closer. The sounds of the basement door being slammed and locked was heard as the pit bull walked down the stairs towards Courage. Standing behind him, he was holding a huge axe that had a massive, toothy grin similar to the one Courage does sometimes. He had an insane look in his eyes, and he got closer and closer to Courage. Poor Courage began sobbing in fear, hopelessly trying to get out of this substance to save his owners and himself. Muriel and Eustace's screams got louder and louder as the buzzsaws were now inches away from them. The pit bull laughed maniacally as he lifted the axe up, ready to slam it down into the lovable pink dog. I knew what was going to happen at that point and began crying myself, wanting to cover my eyes, yet too intrigued to do so. Luckily for me, the screen cut to an outside view of the farmhouse. However, you could still hear the sounds of the basement. Muriel and Eustace's screams changed into screams of pain, and you could hear the buzzsaws tearing through them. The pit bull's maniacal laughing, and Courage's intense sobbing and screaming, then the axe slamming down into poor Courage. Courage howled out in pain, and his last heartbreaking words were heard. "I'm sorry, Muriel." Then there was practically silence as the only sounds heard were the mechanical pit bull's laugh and the buzzsaws tearing into whatever was left of Muriel and Eustace. I was sobbing in a mix of fear, confusion, and sadness. That three of my favorite cartoon characters of all time had just passed on, in just such a gruesome manner too. The end screen with the CGI Courage in front of the theater came up, but something was different. Courage had been replaced for a CGI model of the pit bull, grinning just like Courage, yet in a mocking way. After that, the episode finally ended, and I was scared, sad, and confused. I was a mess of a child. I simply turned off the TV and went to play on my Wii, trying to forget this episode. I never told my parents about it because they probably wouldn't have believed me. I don't remember ever seeing that episode again or hearing anything about it on the internet. I honestly have my doubts if this really did happen or if it was just a vivid nightmare that I'm confusing for a childhood memory. However, if any of you have seen or heard something about this episode, please contact me. I'd love to see what your reactions and thoughts are on. And that, my little shadows, was Courage the Cowardly Dog, Lost Episode, Courage's Replacement. A Courage the Cowardly Dog Lost episode, written by RS Productions. My final thoughts on the story? Really amazing story. People, hell, even me, take notes. This is how you write a lost episode creepypasta, people. This is the kind of effort, time, and creativity that is needed to make an amazing creepypasta. Hell, this beats out anything that I've ever written. I mean, lost episode-wise, that is. But still, I mean, this right here, My Little Shadows, is exactly the kind of thing that you need to sit there and really work on if you're making a story. Because this one was absolutely perfect in so many ways. Okay, let's start off with the positive sides of the story. For one, the storyline itself. I loved how this was actually more or less an alternate episode more from Courage's replacement. And if you don't know what that episode was, I think it had to do with something about like the giant robotic dog or something like that replacing Courage. And there was like a bunch of other stuff or something that more or less came on, I guess. I remember the episode to an extent, but I can't really recall every single thing. I mean, it's been a while since I've seen the show, but I love the fact that the grammar, for one, the grammar, it's a sentence structure, everything, tip-top, perfect, the kind of thing that I absolutely love when people really work their hardest with a story. This one was absolutely amazing and beautiful. The grammar flowed out so well, I didn't have a single issue with reading any of this. Another thing about this episode that I liked a lot was that this honestly could have been a real episode. I mean, if you really think about it, this entire episode itself played out so very well. And I loved the villain in this creepypasta episode. I loved the pit bull. I mean, I happen to love pit bulls. They're beautiful creatures, but this one was very, very well done. I mean, the character of him, was well thought out, well built up and everything. Like, a little innocent kind of thing, but then later on being like crazy nut job insane. I mean, that's kind of typical for a lot of Courage the Cowardly Dog villains and everything. And this one plays out so well to, for a Courage villain that it's very believable. And another thing I genuinely loved about the story was the heavy amount of detail that was put into the story. I actually visualized everything that was going on within the story, and let me tell you all one thing right here and right now. This was by far one of the best things. Like, I visualized everything, and let me tell you, I actually got a bit of a chill reading this. I mean, Courage the Cowardly Dog can be extremely screwed up at times, and this is one of those episodes that I think John Dilworth himself would freaking, applaud greatly. I'm not joking. I mean, hell, if anything, this person could seriously be a writer for Courage the Cowardly Dog. Like, this was a very well thought out, very well made episode. And I like the fact that all the characters were all in sync. They weren't, like, different, they didn't act different, they didn't act out of ordinary. Muriel acted the same, Eustace acted the same, Courage obviously acted the same. Like, everybody acted the way that they should have, and that just plays out a lot better. Another thing, too, I genuinely liked about this was that, the parts in the story that, really built up. It didn't automatically go to blood and gore territory. In fact, there was no blood or gore at all. Now, there was a mention of death and everything that did happen, which, if anything, played out very well with the episode itself. I mean, it was really, really good. The fact that Courage getting beat up and everything, and just slowly but surely, getting there. But I think the best part about this creepypasta, the number one best part, is that this one didn't have a happy ending. At least episode-wise. And that actually really added a lot more to the story itself, and really played out greatly when it comes to what exactly these creepypastas should have. I mean, a happy ending within a lost episode is a good thing, although not many creepypastas tend to do this, but this one definitely played out very, very, very well. Because, usually what happens is that, Eustace usually does get the short end of the stick when it comes to the series, let's be honest. So, I mean, but usually what happens in a Courage episode is that, Courage winds up winning in the end, or he gets really beaten up, but he still wins. Muriel is always safe, and then Eustace is usually, whatever happens to Eustace, to be honest. And it played out, that entire thing, that's something I was kind of expecting, but I was kind of, blown back a little bit from the actual content itself. With Courage not being able to save Muriel and Eustace this time, and not being able to save his owners, and not even being able to save himself. I mean, that just kind of, played out so very well and so very detailed and everything. You can really feel it. You know, you're expecting, you know, Courage to finally be able to get free at the last minute, but that doesn't happen. And in the end, Courage dies, Muriel and Eustace die, and the Pitbull wins. The villain actually wins in this episode. And that right there was a huge, and I repeat, a huge plot twist, which made this story even better. If anything, I probably would have started clapping during the narration, but I had to withhold myself from doing that until I got to the review. RS Productions, you did a very damn good job with this story. You know, better yet, you really worked hard with this story. You really mastered this concept. You know, and this is, and I'm proud of you. I'm genuinely, extremely, very proud of you for doing this. You did a very amazing job with the story. I mean, you played it out well, and it's obvious that you have been listening to my advice and everything, and the advice of everybody else, and really been pushing yourself further. This right here, people, take notes, like I've said before. Take as many notes as you possibly can. Learn from this writer. Learn from this author. Learn everything that you can. But make everything your own. Give it your own little spice to it, like this story did. Now, are there any negatives with this story? If I really had to say one negative, which, let me be honest here, it's going to be a nitpick here, but the only thing I can say is that the whole mentioning of, like, you know, no blood, no gore, no any of that kind of thing, I mean, and, like, I think there were a couple of mentions of, like, you know, the typical Lost episode cliches and things like that. I mean, to me personally, that, I'm willing to let that slide, because wasn't like in your face right then. It wasn't exactly in your face, and it just kind of, you know, was a brief mention and then it moved on, which is good. I mean, I can't really fault the story, but that still was something that I kind of found to be a little unnecessary. I mean, just a little bit, honestly. But like I always say, this is simply my own personal opinion, and if you disagree with it, that's perfectly fine too. We're all entitled to our own opinions in regards to these creepypastas, and this is simply my own thoughts. My final rating of the story, what do you think? 10 out of 10. Beautiful story writing, beautiful grammar, beautiful concept, everything was downright perfect to the letter T. Like, this honestly is better than anything I honestly could write. Like, I'm not joking, RS Productions. You put so much effort into this. Hell, you freaking win, dude. You win the internet for the day. You genuinely do. You made it a very beautifully made story. It was nice. It flowed out well. It honestly seems like something that could be a part of an actual episode of Courage the Cowardly Dog, which adds a lot more believability to it. And better yet, it's just a perfect story. And hell, I'm gonna make sure of it that everybody gets the opportunity to read this story. Like, it deserves to be on the Creepypasta Wikia. That's how amazing this story is. Oh, man. Awesome story, awesome concept, love everything about this. You honestly should be very, very, very proud of yourself, RS Productions. You did a damn good job, and I'm proud of you for it. But what did you guys think about this creepypasta? Did you guys enjoy it? Did you guys not? Also, what would you have done to help make this story a lot better? I certainly would love to hear your own thoughts. Anyway, if you guys are brand new here on this channel and you just got on here, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe because I make brand new videos every single cotton picking day. And also I also do have another channel as well for anybody who's interested in creepypastas that aren't Lost episode based or gaming. Well, actually, I kind of do gaming pastas to an extent on that other channel, but it's called the Dark Archive. And anybody who's honestly interested in checking out that channel or whatever, go right on ahead. It's down in the description box below. Click on it. Watch a couple of videos. If you like it, subscribe, hit notifications. Very much hit notifications, people, because notifications aren't really working too well at the moment. So please hit notifications a couple of times to really make sure that you get, updates on my brand new content. I'm still trying to work out, how often I'm going to upload on that channel. But right now I'm kind of letting it sit. I'm still going to upload on there, but it won't be as frequent until, I really start getting, a lot of views and things like that. Just thought I'd say that. Anyway, like I said, Thanks again for watching today's episode. Congratulations, RS Productions. You did an amazing job. Shout out to you, RS Productions. Shout out to RS Productions channel. And like always, roll the outro because I'm out.
In fear and surprise as your eyes widen, your mouth goes dry with each battered breath. You try to scream, your mind begs to leave, glued to your computer screen. The killers they slash, the tapes burn and crash. The cartridge you bought will be your final haunt. The rituals of hate will seal your fate. The tears you shed will be from the fear-gripping horde-driven nightmarish gore-filled, terrorizing, hateful, burning, violent, rage-inducing, knife-slashing, blood-splattering, silent screams. Only time will tell if you will escape this online hell. Your horror-filled obsessions will come with its own regressions. Your pathetic screams will not be heeded in any way, because your nightmares will come at any day.